Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security policies to guide the state of Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in to this briefing. It's a great privilege to be joined by Brigadier General Amir Avivi, the founder and chairman of IDSF. General Avivi, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you, Moshe.
We have a lot of questions to go through, a lot of updates in this war. Maybe we can start with what is new in Gaza, and specifically a question that many people are asking is, when is that operation going to really become full scale on the southern side of Gaza in Rafah?
Well, I think that every day that is passing, we're getting closer to the operation. I know I've talked to some of our generals in the army. They already planned the way they want to evacuate the citizens from Rafah. They already approved operational plans with the cabinet. We know the Prime Minister is very strong on going into Rafah and doing what is needed. We know that we had the Minister of Defense last week in Washington. We know that the Prime Minister also sent Dermer. So I think that really Israel is trying to create an alignment with the U.S. administration about these issues, reassuring that we can do this while moving the Palestinian society out of Rafah. I think it's imminent. I would be very surprised and disappointed to see a reality where we're not going to Rafah, but at the moment I assess that this will happen. When exactly, even if I knew, I couldn't say, but I can say that definitely the army and the government understand that we need to go in and finish the job.
Is the delay in Rafah to the strategic advantage of the IDF, or is every day that passes, does it create a more difficult operational situation?
No, obviously, one of the problems of war is keeping pressure all the time. We are not doing that for a long time. We haven't expanded our takeover in Gaza. We didn't do that with the 2 battalions in the central camps, and also not in Rafah. It's time is not working for us, working against us. And I think this is also why Hamas is trying to stall, trying to keep negotiations, pushing trying to portray negotiations of hostages. But overall, also Hamas feels that time is on his side, and the more time will pass, the more international pressure will be on Israel. And we also even see within the Israeli society, instead of everybody being focused on war, we see protests being renewed in a pretty large scale in the last few days. And this is very bad. And we have to go back to do what we need to do to win a war.
There seems to be a very large focus on the civilian issue in Rafah, that the U.S. administration was not happy with how the IDF was going to deal with the civilians. But in previous briefings, I think you've told us that the whole idea of moving the civilians from the north of Gaza to the south itself was a major operation. Why are we so focused now on the civilians in Gaza in a way that we weren't when it came to Khan Yunis or Gaza City?
Rafah is no different from Khan Yunis or the central camps, and certainly not from the north. We moved these citizens more than 30 miles from the north to the south. That was an operation, taking 1 million people and moving them 30 miles. Now we have to move them 3 miles. Why is that supposed to be complicated? But I think that there is really an intention to make it seem like it's a very complicated issue, to try to stop Israel from going into Rafah, to try and portray reality saying, yes, this can be done with maybe pinpointed operations or not full scale. It doesn't work. In order to win, we need to go into Rafah and take over the whole Rafah area, including every single tunnel and underground infrastructure. This is the only way we can find our hostages. This is the only way we can reach the leadership of Hamas and destroy them. There is no going around this. This is physics. This is war, the way wars work. We need to go in and take over Rafah and achieve the goals of war.
Ramadan is ending next week. Is all of this really at the end of the day tied to when Ramadan ends?
Well, it shouldn't have been a consideration, but it is maybe. And maybe the prospect of doing the operation after Ramadan maybe definitely increases. I think that the ability to go through Ramadan without major incidents, it's a big success. Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah didn't manage to really mobilize Israeli Arabs or Palestinians in Judea and Samaria to riot and join the Hamas war.
What can you share with us about your views or IDSF views about the day after scenarios for the citizens of Gaza?
So the government has stated clearly that the day after there won't be Hamas, not Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and also not the Palestinian Authority. This leaves us with one choice. This is relying on the local clans and on civil organizations that exist in Gaza that manage civilian infrastructure. But I think that really the one thing that we in IDSF are not aligned with the army, we have a different view, and we are more maybe thinking like the Prime Minister, that the day after, there is no one day after. There is the day after, and then there's the next day and the next day. And once you bring down Hamas, there won't be the day after immediately out of the blue a new leadership in Gaza managing Gaza. The IDF will need to really take over and at least for a while deal also with humanitarian issue like the food and so on, and then gradually finding the right people. Because if you want to build the leadership from scratch, find the right people, see how to organize that, it will take time. Now, you cannot really talk to them before you bring down Hamas because everybody's scared. They're saying, you Israelis, we cannot trust you. Who knows? Maybe you won't go into Rafah. Maybe you won't destroy Hamas. Maybe the world will pressure you enough not to do it. And then what? If we talk to you, then Hamas stays. Hamas will kill us. So you cannot really have a serious discussion with anybody in Gaza without destroying Hamas first. So first we need to destroy Hamas. Then we need to be responsible. Then we start talking to people and hopefully building gradually local leadership.
Okay, so that segues into another big question that has come up with regards to the new Palestinian Authority Prime Minister and the U.S. potentially endorsing his candidacy in his cabinet. How will that play into the day after for Gaza? What you're saying is it can't be the PA, yet the PA is recreating itself on some level.
Nothing changed in the PA. And if we want to see a real change in the PA, no problem. I want to see the international community demanding the PA to abolish the laws they have through which they pay to slay Jews. Let's start with this. Let's see Abu Mazen stopping the payments for terrorists. Then let's see the Palestinian Authority stopping completely incitement in schools. If these two things happen, then I might say, okay, you know what, maybe I'm seeing a change. But just putting some bureaucrat responsible under Abu Mazen that is a dictator, what does it mean? You know, it doesn't mean anything. And if they continue paying terrorists for killing Jews and inciting, why are we supposed to treat them as partners? And also, we have to remember that the way the Palestinian Authority is trying to go around pay for slay is embedding all these terrorists in its own civil organizations and the police. So we have thousands and thousands of terrorists who are part of this infrastructure. This is what the PA is doing. This is why many of the last attacks we saw in Judea and Samaria came from the Palestinian Authority, not even Hamas. So when it comes to our life, and at the end of the day, we the Israelis have to live with this kind of decisions. And no European or American or anybody else is going to die because of such decisions. Israelis are going to pay with their life, and I think we paid enough. And it's time that everybody respects our right to live secure and not die in the hands of these terrorists. So we want to really have a new Palestinian leadership. We need to get serious and demand accountability. Nobody is demanding accountability from the Palestinian Authority on anything. Until we see accountability and a huge change, I don't see any point talking about the Palestinian Authority.
The U.S. administration recently authorized the transfer of munitions and airplanes to Israel. Are you able to comment on how that will affect the war here?
Well, we appreciate a lot the assistance of the U.S. In bringing us weapons and munitions. This is something that is crucial to sustain a long war. We have been in war 6 months, and maybe it's just the beginning. We have Rafah. Maybe we have a full-scale war in Lebanon also. So definitely this is very, very important. And I think it's important not only for Israel. It's important that the globe and the region see the U.S. standing strong with its allies, especially with the closest ally the U.S. has in the world. This sends a message also to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and other countries that the U.S. is a strong partner. It's crucial to continue doing that. And as long as the U.S. will support actively the efforts of war and defending Israel, this will be beneficial for the U.S. also, talking about global leadership.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers sending in questions now or previous to this. We try to get to as many questions as possible. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant made a statement wherein he said that the IDF is shifting from repelling Hezbollah to actively pursuing Hezbollah. Can you maybe elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, I met with Gallant 2 weeks ago for a long meeting. Actually, part of discussing the war and so on, he was very, very interested in the work of IDSF. We talked about it at length. We have seen in the last week or two the IDF managing to really kill quite a few Hezbollah leaders in Syria and in Lebanon. And it's almost now on a daily basis we see effective attack on pinpointing specific terrorist leaders in different places in Lebanon and in Syria. And I think this is what the Minister of Defense meant when he talked about the IDF operations.
Now, there seems to be an uptick, unfortunately, of terrorist attacks in Israeli cities. Is this because of Ramadan? This is because of the war? Is there something bigger happening here?
Well, I think during Ramadan, there is really a huge effort on behalf of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Iranians, Muslim Brotherhood, inside Israel to really try and incite and push forward attacks. Unfortunately, we saw the South Bedouin Israeli citizens attacking We saw also an attack that was done by a Palestinian from Hebron, who was in Israel illegally, and they attacked with a knife in a place where, in a canyon where he worked in the past, and he knew well the place. So yes, it's a time that we need to be very alert. But having said that, we see that overall Ramadan is pretty quiet in Israel.
Okay, let's switch topics entirely. There was recently a change in the draft law as it affects the ultra-Orthodox community here in Israel, wherein they no longer have the same exemption as they had. Are you able to maybe give some background about that, share your personal thoughts on that issue, and whether now is the right time for this issue to come to the fore here in Israel?
I think that one of the big problems is that issues like that really need to be dealt politically are dealt legally by the Supreme Court or by the legal advisor of the government. And I think it's problematic because in the legal world, everything is black and white, and life is much more complicated than that. And I think that trying to put this issue that has been going on for so many years, trying to solve it in for war completely, it's quite problematic. Of course, IDSF position, our position is definitely that we should encourage recruiting the ultra-Orthodox, all those who are not studying Torah. I mean, we understand the importance of studying Torah, and people who study from morning to night, I think this is something we respect, but there are thousands and thousands of ultra-Orthodox who are not doing that and should be serving, and this is really what the army needs, these thousands, to build, instead of a battalion of ultra-Orthodox, a brigade of ultra-Orthodox. Of course, we can also bring them to the police, National Guard, and so on. So I believe that these decisions make now won't make a huge difference. It's even, I would say, worsening in a way the situation, because coercing them is not the right way. I don't see the government falling because of this. And I think that at the end of the day, step by step, we'll move forward. We in IDSF are trying to really assist in encouraging the ultra-Orthodox to serve a meaningful service. And I hope that this will happen. I said several times on TV that I'm very unhappy with some of the leadership of the ultra-Orthodox. I don't think they understand what a biblical moment this is now, how existential is this war, and they need to change. I mean, the society is changing much faster than the leaders and the rabbis. They're not really connected to what's going on in their own society and in Israel overall.
Thank you. And just following up on that, I spoke a week or two ago with General Ari Singer about his view of the Hesder accommodation. And I think it would be valuable if you could share that as well. Meaning, in your view, the IDF has made certain accommodations for the religious Zionist community. Does the IDF view those as bad accommodations that they were pushed to make, or overall those accommodations for the religious Zionists were good for the IDF, and as such, similar or related accommodations could be made for the ultra-Orthodox?
I think that until the war, the IDF basically was not really interested in drafting the ultra-Orthodox. For them, it was like a pain, you know, they didn't want to deal with this. So yes, they made accommodation, especially in the Haredi battalion. But overall, they weren't taking this too seriously. And also, I'm afraid that in the army, the guys who are actually dealing with this, they don't really understand the Haredi community. They don't bring really people who are professionals in this area. So it's done in a way, in a very unprofessional way. And now suddenly the army does want the Haredim. And if they want Haredim, they need to be professional. They need to accommodate this. They need to understand that for the Haredim, it's very important to have a surrounding that supports their beliefs. The only way to do it is really doing a Haredi brigade, which is against the overall tendency of the army not to have unique units like that, but to spread people in other units. So, for example, we had a Druze battalion for a long time, and the army dismantled it. It didn't want a Druze battalion. He wanted to Druze that serve in many different units. But this cannot be done with the ultra-orthodox. They are different, and we have to adjust to what they need and really get the leaders to support it, because I wanted to explain what the price is for not doing that. Let's say that a Haredi guy really wants to go to the army. He's willing to do so. Let's say that even his parents overall would agree. If the leadership or the rabbi doesn't agree, his sisters, for example, won't be able to marry. It's not only about the guy who is joining the army, it's about the whole family. The whole family will be affected by that. So it's not even a solution just to talk to the people and convince them. It's not about convincing a guy to draft. This will affect his whole family. So we really need to get the leadership to understand that we accommodated things in a way that is beneficial for everybody.
And just to clarify, for many years, the ultra-Orthodox community has said that the army doesn't need them, as you're stating. But now the army does need them. Is that just for this immediate war, or moving forward, there is an understanding within Israel that there must be a larger standing army from now on?
So I think that because there is an understanding that we need a big army and not like what some generals, which are not in the IDSF, thought that we need a small army. A big army requires much more soldiers. And yes, it's not for the short term. This is for the long term. We need a much bigger army. We need a much bigger ground forces. We need more battalions, more brigades, more divisions. And in this context, we also need the ultra-Orthodox.
Thank you, General Avivi, for taking all of these questions. We'll end with one final question, a little bit different than usual. Last week in your briefing, many of our viewers reached out to me and said, wow, things aren't looking so good in Israel. They got this sense that you were a little more pessimistic about the war here in Israel. So maybe we could conclude this briefing with a little bit of spirit from a general who knows how to rile up and provide motivation for his soldiers.
No, definitely. I mean, I think that I'm very optimistic. I mean, I think that eventually in Gaza overall, in Rafah, we'll win decisively. I mean, yes, we see hurdles. Yes, it takes more time than what we want, but eventually we'll go in and we'll destroy Hamas. We'll destroy them and we'll find the hostages, and then we'll deal with the north. What will happen in the north, hard to say. But when I see the way our soldiers and commanders are excelling in combat, nothing is stopping them. I mean, I talk to the commanders who are fighting on the ground. They feel so much empowered by their capabilities to really decisively win every battle. And this is very, very reassuring. I mean, the army has improved exponentially since the beginning of the war. While we are completely destroying their capabilities, we are building huge capabilities every day, really spending and a lot of money in the buildup of forces and capabilities and technologies. And So I'm very, very optimistic. And when we'll have to deal with Hezbollah, we'll deal with them. We'll deal with them and we'll win both on both fronts.
Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Thank you for your leadership during this war. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Again, we've now changed the clocks here in Israel, so we're back to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.